All right, guys. All right, we're going to talk a little bit about the spread of disease and the reason for this. So we talked about like first defense and second defense, and normally I would go on to third defense, but I'm actually going to skip that and just go straight to spread of disease, and we'll come back to the other ones. Just because, again, of what's happening currently, I think it would be more interesting to talk about the spread of disease. Plus, I have something I want you guys to check out if you have a chance that has to do with getting diseases to spread quickly. All right? Cool. So ways diseases spread. So you have many different ways that any kind of pathogen, any type of bacteria can kind of be transmitted. So you have physical contact. So a disease can be transmitted from person to person by things like touching, coughing, sneezing, touching contaminated surfaces. So that's like a big deal right now, as you know, because going out, let's say to Walmart, you have to wear a mask. Now, wearing that mask isn't necessarily meant that, you're being protected from other people. It really just means that you're keeping in your own germs. So that way you're not infecting anyone, right? And the whole entire reason of staying a certain amount of length away from people is to minimize that physical contact. So things can also spread through things like contaminated food or water, which makes sense. There's a lot of bacteria and pathogens that live and thrive in rotten food, stagnant water. So anything that you might eat that is bad or drink water that is stagnant, you are definitely ingesting bacteria at that point. And then you also have things like infected animals. So animals can carry a range of diseases just like we can, right? Because we are animals. So things like fleas, ticks, and mosquitoes easily always harbor some type of disease or illness, which can go from animal to human. This is through something called a vector. All right, so multiple modes of ways to spread a disease. All right, so you have a few different players in how disease spreads. So you have the host. The host is a simple or complex organism that is affected by the agent. Age, I don't know why there's a W in the word age, stress, vaccination statuses, that all affects somebody or the host, right? So if you are under extreme stress, your immune system is already kind of down and shot. So you are more likely to get something or more likely to transmit something. Age, as you get older, it's very easy to get sick. Your immune system becomes a little more compromised. When you are very, very young, like babies, very compromised immune systems because it's still growing. So clearly that has a large role to play. Vaccination status is important because, again, things like, let's think currently with things like the measles, right? That is something that should have been eradicated and should be gone, but it's not because people have stopped vaccinating against it, meaning that your body is no longer, has the tools equipped to fight it, which now means people are getting sick from it. So vaccines are actually super important in order to help people stay healthy. So a susceptible host is a person lacking or a lower immune system, and then a compromised host is somebody whose normal defense is impaired, therefore is more susceptible. So like we're in our current predicament, our current situation right now, we're trying to protect people who have compromised immune systems by staying home, right? Me and you have decent immune systems. We are fine, but it really comes into play with people who have maybe something like an autoimmune disease, or is fighting some kind of cancer and going through chemo where their body cells are being attacked. We're really trying to make sure that those people, compromised people, are the ones being safe. So just going through a few common pathogens. So you've got things like bacteria, right? This is a nice little microscopic picture of bacteria. They will kind of just like cells. They don't have nucleuses, as we know. They can be found anywhere, like any kind of area that is common. Think about anything that you touch, like at school, the little Chromebook keyboards. Yeah, they're probably teeming with bacteria. Doorknobs, teeming with bacteria. The button for the water fountain, gross. Normally, if you are sick with anything that's bacterial, there's antibiotics, right, to help slow the growth, eventually killing off the bacteria. Some common things caused by bacteria would be things like strep throat, sinus and lung infections, and some food poisoning. Another common pathogen are viruses. This is what we're facing right now. So the coronavirus, right, kind of looks something more like this. So it has more structural components, meaning it has DNA and protein. So it's a little more complicated than just bacteria. It cannot reproduce outside of cells, which is why it needs you, right? Viruses literally need to be inside you to incubate, to grow, to reproduce, and then they can move on to infect something else. So you're the perfect incubator for things like a virus. With low-key viruses, you can use something like an antiviral, which again helps slow the viral replication. It helps slowing it reproducing, so that way eventually that it dies in the body. Then common things caused would be influenza, common cold, measles, HIV, and AIDS. And another one to put on the list, corona, right? COVID-19 is a virus. So it's, again, it needs a body to incubate in order to then be transmitted somewhere else. Fungi, ooh, yay. Again, this is what the top picture is kind of cool looking. That's how fungi look. So the microscopic unicellular yeast or molds, they usually infect the body on the surfaces near openings, meaning anywhere this is going to be gross, like the corners of the mouth, anywhere that is moist, like the corner of the toes, and it's normally because there is an abundance of water, it's dark, and that you must, you could have, stepped somewhere, grabbed something that had this fungal kind of pores left behind. So antifungals are used. They help destroy the cell wall because it is a more plant-based cell that we're trying to destroy. So a common disease would be like athlete's foot or a yeast infection. You can see the picture at the bottom. That's what athlete's foot looks like. This is a common thing which happens when you walk around in bare feet in a moist area where a lot of people do the same. So all of my people going to college, this is why you wear flip-flops in your shower. If you walk around your shower in bare feet, your feet are gonna look like that bottom picture. Promise. Okay, you also have things like protozoa. They're so adorable. They are unicellular, microscopic. They are very common in water supplies of very poor developing countries. Again, because there could be stagnant water or just because of the amount of stuff being poured into their water supply, causing them to grow. So there are drugs that help to interfere with their metabolism, meaning that it helps break them down. They cause things like malaria and sleeping sickness. So these are more like little microscopic organisms that could be found in any body of water. This is why it would be important that if you got lost on a desert island, you somehow need to sterilize your water. You would need to burn it somehow because these little guys could definitely be lurking and living in there. Ooh, my favorite, worms. All right, multicellular organisms that like to live within spaces of the body and body cells. All right, so these things, what they pretty much do is, again, like most things, it doesn't want you to die, you're its host. It just feeds off of you. They can actually attach to the intestinal or stomach wall, and it siphons food away from you. So you have a constant feeling of being hungry, but not full, because this guy is actually just siphoning all that food away from you. This can be done with different types of medicines, again, to destroy the worm. And what's hard about worms is, like the roundworm or tapeworm, is if you're not careful, they actually can split apart. And what's kind of gross is that bottom guy, he looks more like a ribbon. Each segment could contain eggs, so what ends up happening is it actually sheds off one of its segments, and then those end up in the rest of the body to produce more worms. So yes, they are more common for in things like raw meat. So agents. An agent is how the disease is capable of causing disease. So you have biological agents, meaning living organisms that evade the host, pathogens. You have a chemical agent, a substance that can interact with the body, like pesticides, food additives, medicines. And then you have physical things like heat, light, noise, and radiation. So all of these are an agent of incapable of causing a disease. So we talked about some biological. I showed you the pathogens. Chemical, that would be things like pesticides that can end up causing a disease later on, or physical, like radiation, right? That is still disease causing, even though radiation is not a living thing. All right, portals. Portal of entry is how an infectious agent enters the host, and then portal of exit is when it leaves. So it sounds kind of funny, but pretty much what's going to have to happen is it has to enter, and then it's going to end up leaving, because what it wants to do is it wants to grow and thrive inside you, and then it wants to spread on farther, so it's going to end up leaving at some point as well. Right, so you have a portal of entry and a portal of exit. So this is, again, just kind of showing you how this is going to work, and I'm going to quickly explain. So how the stages work. So you have incubation. So the incubation stage is the time interval between entry of the infectious, oh, my cat sneezed, agent into the host and onset symptoms, the invading the tissue and reproducing. For example, chickenpox incubates for about 2 to 3 weeks. The infected person is contagious from 5 days before the skin actually starts erupting. So what's really important about this, and what I want to kind of relate to, is, so with COVID-19, what we're seeing for an incubation period is that 2 weeks. That's why at first, they were like, we're going to quarantine for just, you got to be quarantined for 2 weeks. Because what happens is once it invades the body, it needs about that time to start incubating, and that's around time that you're going to start showing symptoms. And you might not show symptoms. You could be something called asymptomatic, which just simply means that it is carrying inside of your body and growing, but it's not showing. So you can still pass it along. Your body just happens to not be showing any signs of it. All right, so then you have stage 2. So this is when you're going to have non-specific symptoms. So a lot of different things, like think about the common cold or the flu, is where you start appearing with things that could be anything: a cough, headache, runny nose, itching, right? That could apply to so many things. We've all been maybe guilty of typing in, I have a really gross cough and a runny nose into Google, hoping it would tell you what you have, but that could be a multiple of different things, right? So stage 2, you start seeing certain symptoms, but they're very non-specific, meaning it could really cover a lot. Stage 3 is actually having the illness. So this is just the illness stage. This is where you're actually manifesting specific signs and symptoms of the infectious agent. This is when people would start actually seeing signs of that particular illness. Like for COVID-19, you would start seeing the really, really gross cough, all the other signs of it. You go get tested for it because you're like, I think I definitely now have it, right? In the case of the chickenpox, you'd actually start breaking out into those hives. And then stage 4 is the convalescent stage, which is a period of time from the beginning of disappearance of acute symptoms until it completely leaves. Just meaning that it incubated inside your body, you did your best, and the returning to health last part of it is the virus or bacteria either leaving or killed by whatever means that you took in order to get rid of it. Again, remember, the bacteria and viruses don't necessarily want to kill you. It's not the goal, right? A bacteria or virus likes to grow inside you and use your resources and wants to be passed along. You need to be alive most of the time in order to pass these things along. So it wants to just invade, make you sick, and hopefully you come into contact with something else where it can reproduce and allow things to jump onto the next host. Right, so what we're experiencing now is the more and more people are going out, the more and more people who are coming in contact with each other, they're providing that mode or that system for that disease or virus to move around, right? COVID-19 is really scary, again, because of it being asymptomatic in some people. You could be walking around incubating it, showing no signs, and you could very much touch something that somebody else touches, and then they could get sick, and then again, depending on their immune system, it could be very bad. So what's interesting is just how things move around, how diseases and how bacteria and viruses and how these things are able to kind of jump between different hosts. So I want to kind of show you, and you've probably heard of the game Plague Inc., but I'm just going to, put little snapshots and pictures of it, and I want you guys to check it out if possible, because it literally goes through this whole entire PowerPoint and is literally what is happening in the world around us right now.